This is the electrical connection fog light kit, and I'm going to go through just a real brief installation video on this product. Now, I have already installed the brackets on these lights, and so you'll notice on the right headlight the kind of L-shaped bracket goes on the right hand side. On the left headlight it goes on the left hand side. So these brackets just kind of screw in with some little nylock nuts and some machine screws, and I've left them loose so I can adjust the position of the fog light once I get it onto the motorcycle. So you'll notice this fog light has a lot more adjustability than most fog lights, because you can not only adjust it in the up and down, there's a slot here that's going to allow you to adjust it left and right, and additionally there's a screw on the back to adjust the aiming or the height of the headlight. So you've got tons of adjustability in this product. So anyway, with that, we'll carry forward and start the installation. And I've already removed the fog light covers from the motorcycle. I've previously shown you how to do this. I believe it's in the valve adjust video. But anyway, once you have these covers off, we're going to have to cut out these knockouts. So they're pretty simple to cut out. You can just take some side cutters and get in here and cut these tabs out. And once you get all the tabs cut out, the knockout will fall out. And then we'll just trim the little cuts up a bit to make it look a little cleaner. So there's the knockout plug that came out. And so I'm going to clean up these tabs with a Dremel tool, simply because it's easier and faster for me to do it that way. Electrical Connections suggests you use side cutters or end nippers like these, and you can use those to start out with, but I'm going to have to come back and clean it up with a Dremel anyway, so I'm just going to do it this way. And the kit includes a trim piece that goes around that cut. So once we get the cut all trimmed up, we're going to install this trim piece so that the end of the trim piece ends up at the top of the fog light assembly, or the cover assembly. So I'm just going to kind of work this piece around that edge. And so I'm just kind of pressing down all the way around until I get the seam in the trim piece. Get the seam pushed in place. And then when I get up here to the end, I'm going to cut it off, and I'm going to cut it off a little long on purpose. So I've got it all the way around, and I'm just going to cut it with maybe 1/8 of an inch or so, a little bit long there, so that it will be under pressure once I get that last piece in. And if I need to, I can cut more if I can't get that in. So I just kind of push in on that until I get those halves to kind of meet. And there you go. So there's the final trim piece installed that goes around that cut. Just kind of gives it a cleaner appearance. And I just repeated the process on the other side. So there's those two fog light covers all prepared and ready with the trim pieces in place. Next, we need to mount this little L bracket to the motorcycle. So it goes with the short end of the L up against this bracket on the side of the crash bar, and a little machine screw goes through there to hold it with a nut on the end. And I'm not going to tighten this up all the way. I'm just going to leave it a little bit loose so that I can make adjustments to the position as I need to. Now we need to remove this 12mm bolt on the front of the crash bar, because that is the main mounting bolt that's going to be used to hold the light assembly on. So I'm going to bring the light up into place. So I'm just going to set the bracket into place, and I'm going to reinstall the 12mm bolt. And again, I'm not going to tighten anything until I make sure I've got the light in the position I want it to be in. And then down at the bottom here, I'm going to install my last machine screw and nut. And again, I'm not going to tighten this up. I'm going to leave everything loose until I determine that I've got the light positioned where I want it to be. So I've got the light set kind of in the midpoint of all these little adjustment slots. So that's kind of where I want to start, with everything in the midpoint, so that I have plenty of adjustability in all directions. So you'll notice the light can slide up and down on these mounts, and if the side bolts are loose here, it can slide left and right. So we can adjust the light in virtually all of the axes we need to make sure that it gets centered when we put our fog light cover back on. So I'm just going to bring the cover in place and kind of test fit it. And I may have to test fit it 2 or 3 times to get the light centered where I want it to be. So I can remove it. I can make an adjustment. I can even pull the light fore and aft here by loosening this screw right here. So I can adjust how close the light is to the front of the cowl, as well as left and right. So I can adjust it so there's a little bit of an air gap there. So I've kind of made a couple of adjustments and gotten the light to where I believe it's centered and where I want it to be. So at this point, I can remove the cowl and I can just start tightening up the hardware. So I'm going to start with this main nut here, and I'm going to tighten it. And as I tighten this stuff, probably a good idea to go back and recheck and make sure that the light hasn't moved out of adjustment as you're tightening things. And so then I can start tightening these small machine screws. And so I'm just going to start tightening these up. And I've just repeated those steps on the other side of the motorcycle for the right hand side light. So with the lights all mounted now, I'm going to connect the electrical harness. Now this is the left side light, so it gets connected to the longer of the two leads, and you simply plug the red wire into the red wire, and these are little bullet pin connectors, and the black to the black. It's as simple as that. And then you can just route your wire down and across to the other side and pull it under the bottom cowl. And over at the right hand light, we do the same thing. We connect the remaining two leads. Red goes to red, black goes to black. And then the connector that these get plugged into is actually behind this lower cowl. It's right about here where my finger is. So if we look from the back side, you can see this connector right here. So I'm going to reach up in here and kind of pull this connector out, and it's got a dummy plug on it. So I've just reached up in here with a pair of pliers, and I've grabbed onto the bottom of the dummy plug and squeezed in the release, and I just pull that dummy plug off. And now I can just take my plug for my new fog lights and slide it right up into place until it clicks. And there you go. And they provide you with some zip ties, so there's a variety of ways you can tuck the wire up out of sight and zip tie it. I've just elected to zip tie it to the actual bracket itself, and so I've just kind of got a nice loop there pulled up so the wire is pulled tight and free and it's not going to interfere on anything. And then I did the same thing over on the other side of the bike. I just kind of tucked it up out of the way here. So I've got a nice loop there. So if I need some slack, I can simply pull that down and I can adjust, how much slack that's taken up. So once the front cover plate's on, you'll never see that. And so here's the lights installed with the fog light cover plates back in place. This is the button that comes in the Electrical Connections fog light kit. Now, I'm pretty sure they're the only manufacturer that's actually making the OEM button to go into the Honda instrument panel to control the fog lights. So let's take a look at what is required to install a button into this panel. So the first thing we need to do is remove this panel, or at least fold the panel back from the motorcycle. Now, I already have the top shelter removed. There is a shortcut where you can actually lift up the corner of the top shelter to expose these two bolts, because all you need to do to remove this panel is remove these two bolts and the two push pins at the front. So I'm just going to start by taking out these two 5mm Allen bolts, and I'm going to pull the push pin out of the front. And I just repeat those steps on the other side of the motorcycle. So the panel's free now. You can unplug the 4 electrical connectors that hold this panel in and completely remove it from the motorcycle. However, I really don't need to do that. I'm just going to fold it back so I can work with it. Now, to remove the front of this panel, you have to slide it forward about maybe an inch, and then you lift up on the front. And make sure you slide it forward before you pry on the front, or you'll break off. There's a little tab on the bottom that gets broken. And right here, you'll break off the end of this little receptacle where it plugs in. And there's the reason why you have to slide it forward. There's a little hook on the front edge of that tab that snaps into that receptacle. So if you don't slide that panel forward, that hook will catch and it will break off that tab. Now, with the unit folded back and laid on a cloth, I just need to remove these 4 screws that hold these silver side panels on. And you'll notice when I remove the front screws, they are a long screw. So the two screws that go in these front positions, and this being the front of the motorcycle, the front of the panel, are going to be the long variety. And so the ones that go in the back, you'll notice are shorter. So there's the two different lengths of the screws. The longer screw goes toward the front of the panel. Looking in at the front of this panel, you'll notice there's two silver tabs here at the front. So I'm going to start by reaching in here and prying those tabs up so that the sides of the panel can start to release. And so that's how I'm going to start the process of releasing these silver sides. In addition to those tabs at the front, there's tabs along this edge that are hidden inside that you cannot see. The way I'm going to release it is I'm going to push down on this edge while I pull out on the side of the panel. And as I'm pushing down on that edge, that releases each one of those tabs. With the panel removed now, you can see these little tabs that have little rectangular slots in them, and those slots fit into these little protrusions on the sides. So you'll see there's a little stud sticking up there, and that's what that little slot fits into. It fits right over that little stud there and clips into place. And so there you can see how the slot clips into the stud. Now we're looking at the bottom of the instrument panel turned upside down, so that's why I push down on the silver panel. By pushing down on the silver panel, I'm attempting to push it away to release that stud. And it may also help to kind of loosen up the bottom end and pry the bottom end out in this direction just a little bit, because that will tip that front edge up enough to release that stud. So I'm going to try that on this other side. I'm going to try tipping the bottom out a little bit. And I feel the front just released, so there's one tab loose. And I'm going to turn it over now. And I'm walking down this front edge. I'm just trying to do one tab at a time. So I'm going to try to do the tab that's right about here where my thumb is. So I'm pushing it, and I'm kind of prying out a little bit, and there it popped loose. And there comes the bottom tab loose. And there's one more at the bottom. And so I've just got one down at the bottom here that has to release. And this is the last one, and there it just popped out. Now with those two silver side panels removed, we have exposed the two screws down here at the bottom that we need to remove to get this black panel off. So I'm simply going to unscrew these. And these are just very short little plastic self-tapping screws. Now if I flip the unit forward so I can see this forward edge, there's a little black tab right here at the front forward edge that needs to be released to be able to get this black panel out. So I just pull forward on that tab enough that it releases this black cover. And now with the panel set back right side up, I can simply lift that entire cover panel off. And installing a new button is fairly simple. I'm just going to remove the screw that holds the button into place. This is the blank button. So I'm going to just pull the blank button up and out. And I'm just going to take my new button and slide it into place, and I line up these arms with the little slots in the channel in the receptacle. And it's easy as that. And before I put it all back together, I'm going to turn power on the bike, and I'm just going to test the button and make sure I can turn my fog lights on and off with it. I'm going to just go ahead and install this screw back where it was. It's not going to serve a purpose now, but if I ever did want to come back and install that blank button, the screw would be there for me and I wouldn't have to search for it. Now I'm just going to set this decorative cover back into place, and I'm going to snap this little clip at the front down in. And so you see I just pushed there with my thumb and that snapped into place. I'll put the two screws back in here at the rear. And remember, these are those two little short screws. And now I'm just going to snap in these side panels, and they should push in a lot easier than they removed. So you just push them in until they click all the way around. Take the other one. I'm kind of starting at the top. I don't know that it matters. Just get them all the way pushed in until everything clicks and is tight. Then I'm going to flip the panel back over, and I'm going to put the screws back in the bottom of the panel. Remember, the long screws go in the front holes that face the front of the motorcycle. I'm just going to screw these down a little bit. And the two short screws go in the back holes. Now we can turn the panel back over and reinstall it. So I'm going to make sure my wires kind of get tucked in here properly under these tabs. And I'm going to set the rear of the panel in place. And I'm going to make sure before I engage this front tab, remember we've got that hook on the front. So I'm going to slide the panel forward, and I'm going to push down until it snaps on that white clip, and then I pull the panel back. And now I reinstall my 5mm Allen screws and my two push pins that go in here. And I'm kind of pulling this panel behind it forward so I make sure the push pin gets into that hole and that this panel is properly captured. And I just repeat the process over here on the other side of the motorcycle. I reinstall my push pin. I pull forward on this panel, get the push pin into the hole, and lock it in place. So there's my new button installed. That's my fog light button. And if I turn the motorcycle on and push it, there's my new fog lights on. And you'll now see you have a new indicator in the dash that comes on and off when you turn the fog lights on and off. And so if you look at the front edge of my shop, you'll see now as I turn the fog lights on and off, the difference that they make. So they really are going to light up the lower section of the road. And so that concludes the installation of the electrical connection fog lights.